We talk endlessly about boomers. We dissect Gen Z like they're a fascinating new species. Millennials have been analyzed from every possible angle, but there's an entire generation sitting in the middle, barely mentioned, almost invisible. And here's what nobody tells you: their psychology might be the most misunderstood of any living generation. This video is about Generation X, born roughly between 1965 and 1980. Your older coworkers who never complain. The people who built the internet but don't post about their breakfast. We're going to go through what actually shaped them psychologically, not the stereotypes, but the real mechanisms, where the emotional armor came from, why they work the way they work, and what their particular kind of resilience actually costs them. By the end, I think you'll understand them, or yourself, a little differently. Picture this. It's 1978, you're 8 years old, you come home from school and the house is empty, both parents are working, no smartphone, no way for anyone to check if you're okay. You let yourself in, make a snack, do your homework alone, and wait. This wasn't rare. A study published in the American Journal of Orthopsychiatry found that by 1984, approximately 7 million children between ages 5 and 13 were regularly unsupervised after school, an entire generation coming home to silence. That empty house didn't just make them self-reliant, it taught them something much deeper, that you can't always count on someone being there. And when their parents did show up, there was no processing, no talking about feelings. Actions had consequences, fast and direct, no buffer. Psychologists describe this as a high contingency environment, where the link between behavior and outcome is immediate and unavoidable. Your brain learns very early to think 3 steps ahead, to anticipate, to manage. That's not cynicism. That's a nervous system that was trained to survive independently before it was fully formed. Gen X grew up watching their parents talk about stability, then saw divorce rates climb through the 70s and 80s. They watched people give everything to companies, only to get laid off in the next round of restructuring. They were told, work hard, follow the rules, and life will work out. And then the rules just changed in front of them. Psychologists call the coping mechanism that followed defensive pessimism, a strategy where you mentally prepare for the worst outcome, not because you're hopeless, but because preparation feels safer than being blindsided. Gen X doesn't call it that. They call it being realistic. It's not that they stopped hoping. It's that they built emotional armor around the hope. Cross your fingers quietly, but expect the rug to move, because that's what kept happening. And this is a big reason you barely see them on social media. They grew up in a world where privacy was just normal. When you made a mistake as a kid, maybe a handful of people knew. No documentation, no permanence. The idea of broadcasting your life to strangers doesn't feel exciting to them. It feels like a risk they've been trained to avoid. The less people know about you, the safer you are. That's not paranoia. That's a lesson that was earned. Gen X turned irony into a psychological tool. Crack a joke. Keep things at arm's length. Laugh before it stings. You can trace exactly where that comes from. They grew up in the shadow of the Cold War. Teachers talking about nuclear war like it was a weather forecast. Duck and cover drills in school. Adults insisting everything was fine while also preparing for civilization to end. When authority figures hold 2 completely contradictory ideas at once and expect you to just go along with it, you learn to hold contradictions yourself. You develop distance, a kind of protective irony that says, I see what's happening here, and I'm not going to be caught off guard by it. That's not detachment. That's self-defense dressed as humor. Here's what stands out about Gen X in the workplace. They don't talk about it. They don't post about it. They just do it. This work ethic was built early. Paper routes at 5 a.m. bagging groceries, fast food registers where you had to calculate change in your head when the machine broke. These weren't resume builders. They were raw introductions to the adult world, where a 12-year-old could be genuinely responsible for an entire neighborhood's morning. They watched their parents' generation get destroyed by corporate loyalty, so they never believed in the company. But they became fiercely loyal to their own competence. They can't control whether layoffs happen, but they can control whether they're the most valuable person in the room when they do. There's also this paradox at the core of Gen X psychology. They're simultaneously the most independent and the most quietly collaborative generation. They'll never ask for help. They've been solving problems alone since they were 8. But if you need help, they'll show up. Without drama, without a post about it. That's what it looked like when friendship was the only safety net you had. And this is where it gets complicated. Research published in the Journal of Adult Development shows that Gen Xers report significantly lower levels of seeking social support during stressful periods. Not because they don't have people they could ask, but because asking feels like admitting defeat. That self-reliance that kept them safe as children becomes a pattern in adulthood that borders on compulsive. They're extraordinarily capable in a crisis, but that capability often comes from a deep unwillingness to be vulnerable, to need something, to depend on anyone. They spent hours in libraries hunting through card catalogs for a single answer. Information had physical weight. It required effort and time. Cognitive psychologists describe this as deeper encoding. Information that costs something to obtain becomes more permanently integrated into memory. They learn to fix things with their hands because that's what you did. You didn't call a technician. You flipped the bike upside down, got grease on your hands, and figured it out. And now they're watching their own kids grow up under constant supervision, every moment documented, never alone with their thoughts. They gave their children the attention they never received. But sometimes they worry they've made them too dependent, too visible. Because in the Gen X worldview, visibility is vulnerability. The truth is, Generation X might be the last generation that genuinely knows what it means to be alone with your thoughts, to be bored, to solve a problem without looking it up. They're not better than other generations. They're just shaped by a very specific moment, when the old world was ending and the new one hadn't quite arrived yet. They grew up in the gap. They're the bridge generation, and bridges don't get much attention. They're just there, doing the work, holding things together, expecting nothing in return. And maybe that's the most Gen X thing of all, not caring if anyone notices. If this made you see someone differently, a parent, a coworker, yourself, that's exactly why this channel exists. Every week I make videos like this one, deep dives into the psychology behind why people are the way they are. If that's something you want more of, subscribe. It genuinely helps this channel keep going. And if you know a Gen Xer who's never quite been understood, send them this. They won't ask you to, but they'll remember it.